Hello, good evening. Welcome. You join us again for the last and final one of the year. You'll probably see the questions or the comment that we put in there. So we want to hope that you're feeling festive and are all prepared for Christmas, and that you've already broken up, so that you can start to wind down and relax in whatever tier you're in throughout the country. But the main thing is that we're all staying safe and are keeping well. Sam's with me again tonight. Or I should say, have changed locations. I'm at the office. I've had to come here to do a few bits and pieces before the final send off for Christmas. This is my last day before I break up. So, hello everybody. Hopefully, like I say, you're here. Please remember to put any questions that you have within the chat, and we'll try and get around to as many as we can. How are you, Sam?
Yeah, I'm good, thanks. Yeah, pretty good. Looking forward to the break as much as anyone.
How's the helpline going?
Yeah, it's started to quieten down a little bit. We started to see it towards the end of last week, and first day back today, yeah, definitely a little bit quieter than normal.
Good stuff, good stuff. So everybody, well, it appears that everybody is starting to already wind down from your end of things.
Yeah. I think a lot of people finished on Friday, with schools shutting and people not really wanting you in their house this time of year. And I think also because of what's happened earlier in the year, a lot of people have got holidays which they've accrued, and in most instances it's use them or lose them. So people are off this week, luckily.
All right for some, I guess.
Yeah, good for them.
Okay, let's start looking into some questions. And there's a few popping up already. I see a few people in there, so welcome to all you people that are in here already. Good evening. A coding question. If on a ring circuit there is no end-to-end CPC connectivity, but the ZS readings are all satisfactory at the socket outlets, what code would you advise? The end-to-end live and neutral continuity is fine, I think he's referring to that, Sam.
Yeah, so if you've not got end-to-end continuity, three checks. So long as you have got a CPC at each and every socket, and you can meet the maximum ZS for your protective device, and also you must do the adiabatic equation now, because now you've not got two parallel conductors in the ring, but you've got a single conductor. So you've just got to do the adiabatic equation to make sure that typically your 1.5 mil CPC is large enough. If they're all three of those ticks are okay, so CPC at every socket, meet the ZS, and you meet the adiabatic equation, then we suggest you don't need to give it a code, because it's not potentially dangerous to the users of the installation, although it's worthy of an observation, because you want to see that it's not going to get worse due to perhaps damage to the cable, which is going to manifest itself later.
Just in terms of that, Sam, where you say it's not going to get any worse, in terms of like time periods that you're looking at your EICR for the next inspection, would you then be, I know that you probably do less, but what would you suggest in terms of years when you're looking at that?
Yeah, I think you've got to look at the other general conditions that you've witnessed during your inspection and you've seen during your measurement, and make an estimation based on that. Also, if depending upon whether you've not or have got previous indications. So if you've got a previous installation certificate or a previous condition report that tells you at that time the ring circuit was continuous, then you can judge based on the length of time, and has anything happened, has anything been added to. You might also, depending upon what you've agreed with your customer, take the opportunity to actually go around, open up every socket and just make sure that the CPCs are tight. But yeah, if everything does look right, but there is still a break which you've not been able to ascertain why, providing your line and neutral are still a continuous ring, so you've got no overload issues, then you could consider saying that it's not potentially dangerous, but you would like to come back and see it more frequently, so that it's not a sign that there's a cable's been damaged, or talk to the homeowner and see if they'll agree to some investigation work to try and find out where the break is at a later date.
Okay. Let's see what else we've got then. There's not many questions this evening. Good evening. Will you be doing a podcast in 2021? Jamie, it'd be interesting to hear from you in terms of what you actually want to know about in terms of podcasts. It's something definitely we could look into doing. There is, Sam, if I'm not mistaken, there's a low fixed carbon podcast out at the moment. It doesn't go into the depths of some things that I know that some Sparkies would be more interested in, but it does go into, it outlines what's happening in the low carbon fixed side of things.
Yeah,
well.
it's aimed at being a short, I think it's limited to 2-minute podcast every week, I believe, or if not every week, every 2 weeks, just to give people an introduction and to get them involved. I know outside of podcasts, they started to release some information about some of the webinars next year. There's a coding clinic, I think, is the first one, and then there are a few testing webinars which are planned for next year.
Okay, so there's some interesting things that are coming up. And again, if you do have anything that you would like us to talk about, maybe worth noting and dropping it in the comments below. That way we can service you in the best ways. Cooker and hob isolators in the kitchen cupboards, are we okay to install them?
Yes, fundamentally yes. The requirements for an isolator is that it should be readily available to prevent danger, so to remove the supply to the devices. And there's a recommendation when it comes to the oven and the hob, if it's an electrical appliance, that should typically be within 2 meters to make it readily available for operation. But it really is a risk-based assessment. So sometimes people rely on the breaker in the board if they believe that it's in close enough proximity. The danger or potential danger of putting it in a cupboard is that it's not visible, so people don't know where it is as a point of isolation. And also, depending upon where you put it in the cupboard, then users of the cupboard might inadvertently operate the isolator. So those things can also or should also be considered. But yes, it can be placed within a kitchen unit, but perhaps warrants then a little bit more additional labelling to make it clear what its purpose is.
Okay. Someone said, will you be getting a broadband upgrade in 2021? Yes, we're in the office. We're running on Wi-Fi. We're not hardwired this evening. Also, we're on a different machine, so that may have a impact on it. So I do apologise if it is a little bit laggy this evening. It's something that we're looking into to get sorted for the first time back next year as well. Worked in a house recently where the main bonding for gas didn't come to the consumer unit but went to an earth rod. Is this acceptable given the values are satisfactory?
No, that bonding has to come back to the MET of the installation, because the idea of bonding is to create an equipotential bond. So we want everything connected together to try and ensure that there are no differences in potential between accessible parts. So the danger of taking it back to an earth rod means that you've effectively connected that to true earth, but the rest of your installation may not be at true earth. It could be a TNS or a TNCS potential, which can quite easily be 20, 30, 40, 50 volts different from true earth. So no, it should come back to the MET because you're doing it to create that equipotential zone.
Even though he does say that it is an earth rod, Sam.
So it is a TT system.
Yeah.
Okay, so it is a TT system. Strictly speaking, it should come back because depending upon the distances, you could get differences and depending what else is around in that environment, there could be step voltages involved. So yeah, it should come back because you're still trying to create that one equipotential zone. I appreciate with it being 2 TT earth rods, it's less likely to be a vastly different potential, but because we're trying to make sure that there's no difference in potential at all, it should come back to the MET.
Okay. We've got the boss in here again this evening, Sam. Mr. O'Neill's in here, so good evening to you,
Evening.
Mr. O'Neill. He's watching on Twitter, so he's changed his little platform that he's watching on tonight. He's gone for Twitter, so I hope you're well, Mr. O'Neill. You could just rip these Q&As to podcast formats, so people who drive a lot can listen to the answers. It's something that we can have a look at, definitely, and we'll put it to the people above them. I'm sure John will be pleased to hear that there's another avenue that he can go down with these, and hopefully he likes the idea of that as well.
But we're trying to make them live, aren't we? So you
Yeah.
know that's the whole beauty of this. Yes, you can watch them back, but you know if we did it as a podcast, we wouldn't be able to get the live questions. And sometimes, as happens more often, perhaps than not, is one question generates another. So
Yeah.
so it's quite good to keep them live.
Yeah, I also spoke as well about maybe taking this Q&A format, Sam, onto the webinar platform, because typically speaking, we see some around 700 plus people tuning in on the webinar platform. So it may be interesting that we, something that we could look at doing.
Yeah.
Just a general Q&A for people that don't necessarily have social media as well. Let's see what else we've got then. What else have we got? Must ZE always be measured for an electrical installation certificate in the context of adding a new circuit in a commercial industrial installation where the installation cannot be de-energized? So I think he's talking about there, Sam, if he's working on large equipment, he can't gain access to necessarily the control panel room. Is it a necessity to obtain that?
No, it can. So yeah, quite often on a large site that's currently being used, they won't let you pull the earth because they want to contain or maintain production or whatever the facility's there to offer. So it's not practical to disconnect the main incoming earth to take your measurement. However, you could get it by inquiry, for example. So either directly from the DNO, or if you've got previous certification which you can rely on, then you can get it that way as well. It doesn't have to be measured.
I think John's playing around, or someone else has got
John's Twitter account.
John's got John's Twitter account, because he seems to be coming in on both platforms now. So thanks for the laugh there, John. Is there a table where it gives diversity values for oven loadings we can apply to circuit maximum demands?
Yeah, there are tables in the IET on-site guide, Appendix A, which give you, I think they're limited. I think it talks about either a standard domestic or a small industrial or commercial or a larger, and it gives you some guidance with diversity. But you can use your own. Diversity's an engineering judgment. So if it's something that you're familiar with and you know how the thing's going to be used, then you can document your own reason for diversity. So those tables in the IET's on-site guide Appendix A are given as a guide, but you can use similar type of engineering approach.
Ben's asked the question again, Sam, about the PRS, and are they extending that date given the current situations that are going on in the country? I still haven't heard anything. I don't know if you've heard any different. He's also added on there, can remedial works be done after this date if the work is in progress?
So yeah, we still haven't heard any extensions to the April the 1st date, which is rapidly approaching. I think that the government have got their hands. I'm trying not to laugh, but I think they've got a fair few things on their mind at the moment. Yeah. I mean, I woke up in Tier 4. I didn't know it existed on Saturday, and then found out that the ports were shut. So, but that's. Yeah, so we've not heard anything. As soon as we hear anything, we'll let you know. But I think they might be working on the principle that because landlords originally wanted some time, they didn't want, that there are far more existing tenants than there are new tenants. So they wanted some time, which they were given. So although the first for areas for new tenants came in July of this year, they gave existing tenants up to April the 1st. So it's quite feasible that they may not extend that deadline, even though all of these things have happened, because they may take the stance that they gave landlords enough time to get issues resolved. But yeah, I think we're just waiting to hear. At the moment, we've not heard that there's any change, so we're still working on the basis of it's 1st of April. The remedial work, depending upon the severity of what was found, there's still a requirement for a 28-day resolution unless there are circumstances which are preventing that from happening. For example, access to the ability, because maybe they have to get tenants out to do some of the work and they can't do that reasonably. So that's where they've got to have conversations with the local authority to be able to demonstrate that they're doing everything reasonably practical to stay within that time frame, or to make the time frame for remedial work as small as possible.
So if they've started the work, for example, then Sam, that could maybe go over a period of months opposed to that 28 days, as long as they're showing that they can actually, they are making progress and the work is getting done. However, it doesn't necessarily have to be within that 28 days.
Yeah, I think that's the intent. So long as they're demonstrating that they're doing everything reasonably practical and they've removed, the C1s, and they're doing the things that they are doing are further reducing the risks of C2s. Then yeah, if they can demonstrate that to the local authority, then the local authority should find that acceptable.
Okay. Dimitri's put a question up here that I can see. I can't quite understand where you're coming from with that, Dimitri. It says generally LSX are mechanically protected for screw penetration. Use an RCD RCBO where it goes on a wall where it contains metal parts. And then he's followed it up a little bit further down saying, what about SWA cable? Can you make heads or tail of that, Sam?
Well, so SWA cable would normally be perceived as having its own mechanical protection. Mm-hmm. So unless it was, for example, a TT installation, you wouldn't normally need to protect an SWA cable with RCD protection, because it would be considered having its own additional mechanical protection. The cable, I'm not sure whether did he mean LSF cable when he put. I'd have to look at a keyboard to see if F and K were
not necessarily close. No.
So yeah, not really sure what he meant by that, but
maybe you want to rephrase it, Dimitri, and then we'll hopefully be able to get an answer to you. Dunk's in here as well, so we've got Duncan in here. Good evening to you, Mr. McFarlane. I hope you have a great Christmas as well. Thank you for my Christmas card that I received via email today. Evening, I am wiring a swimming pool and the concrete base around the pool has steel reinforcing going into it. Is it correct for me to earth bond on this so that it's all the same potential? Thanks.
Yeah, there's a note, so a normative or informative note in the 702 section for swimming pools. If you've got a PME supply and it's got reinforced concrete base, then we should bond that to the PME system. You've not said whether it is PME, but I'm assuming, as it's probably the most common of new supplies now, that it is. In which case the advice would be to consider that note and follow it as a recommendation. So yeah, by that, due to ingress, due to possible exposure of that metal framework, then we need to bond it and make it part of the equipotential zone for our swimming pool TNCS system.
That was a mouthful. I did see that Ben. I know Ben asked the question about the PRS. Ben normally keeps me up to date with the scores of the football. So, is there any scores yet? Is there any scores going on?
Was it Chelsea West Ham?
Chelsea West Ham. Yeah, I'm hoping for a draw on that one. Hi, if a DB is above the entrance of a flat, is it a C2, C3, or no code, please, Sam? Doesn't actually say what the construction of the distribution board is. He's just asking if it's above a flat door. Okay,
so if we talk about, if this is a combustible consumer unit, so plastic consumer unit, it's not a 17th edition Amendment 3 consumer unit. So if it is combustible plastic, then that's recommended as a C3 if it's above a sole escape route to the property. So if there is no alternative exit or entrance, a back door, for example, then we would recommend that that's coded as a C3, providing it's fit for purpose, so that it's still got all the correct barrier and enclosure protection required. Being above the door as well, you'd have to look at accessibility. So what's it being used for? If it's providing the point of isolation, for example, that we talked about earlier for a circuit, then that might also be worth considering when you're looking at what it's used for. But in general, just its location would be based around, if it's a plastic board consumable, then we recommend a C3. If it's in a sole escape, if it's in the sole escape route from the property.
It's easy for you to say. You'll get there at the end. Get there in the end. Sean said here, if you're a domestic installer, is it legal to use the green certificates for an EICR? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not so much legal as it complies with BS 7671. If you're doing these under the PRS scheme, then what you need to do is, because as a domestic installer, it's not part of the domestic installer scheme to do condition reports, then you have to go down the route of evidencing competence to the landlord. So the landlord will have a checklist that's given in guidance by the government department, the MHLCG, and he'd need to check for compliance with that checklist. So the inspector would need to have relevant qualifications, relevant insurance imposition. So those would be requirements specifically for the PRS scheme. If we're talking about condition reporting in general outside of the PRS scheme, then yes, green or non-registered certificates could be used, and therefore they would be still considered compliant with BS 7671, and there'd be there's no specific requirement about legal requirements outside of PRS.
Okay. 1-0 Chelsea apparently, Sam. Just to let you know. Thiago Silva by the looks of it.
Oh, wow.
They're just still rumbling on about this this swimming pool as well. They said if it was any exposed conductive parts and metalwork within the construction of the pool needs to be earthed together. If it was a TNS or TT, any metalwork and steel within the base would need to be earthed too on swimming pools. As this is a rounder pool, I've put this board on a TT system. It sounds like they're having a chat amongst themselves there.
Yeah, I mean, I sort of specifically focused in on the reinforced metalwork associated with the concrete for the swimming pool. General rules apply, and yeah, there are still bonding requirements. If you've got any simultaneously accessible, exposed, extraneous conductive parts, you're going to have to create that equipotential zone. But there are some strict requirements about what you can have with regards to exposed conductive parts, extraneous conductive parts, and the requirements for bonding within 702.
Okay. Well, I think we're out of questions. We're out of questions this evening. Barry's going to have a look in section 702 to refresh himself, so hopefully he gets that sorted. It's a little bit cold and a little bit wet to be working outside. Might I add. Is there any other questions before we start to wrap things up? If there's no more, then we'll sort of close it down. Things to mention, as Sam's already mentioned, the webinars will be starting up again next year. So the wire will be back. So if you do have a chance to have a look at those, and over the Christmas period, if you are bored and you are getting tired of spending too much time with your relatives, you can go online and go onto our secure part of the website and go onto any webinars that are on demand, so you can go back and watch throughout the whole year all of the webinars that we have produced throughout the year. So if there's one of them that takes your fancy and you want to have 45 to 50 minutes off from the kids, you can gain access to them via that. You'll also gain a CPD certificate for actually watching it as well. So if you haven't watched it already, you can go on there and watch it again. Is there anything else? Gary's popped in with a question, Sam, before we start to wrap things up. Carrying out an EICR, unknown earthing arrangement, ZS measures 0.22. Bond for water in main house comes in from the consumer unit Outbuilding contains lighting and power fed direct from the main house consumer unit, but also has water and oil that resurface. Bonds there are via a rod. As earthing arrangements is not identified, would it need to be rebonded back to the consumer unit house or some sort of FI required?
So I think from the description we've got an outbuilding where the services appear to be re-emerging and they're bonded to TT in the outbuilding. So I'm guessing that the whole of the outbuilding has been TT'd, which is perfectly acceptable. You can do that. So you've created a separate earthing system and a separate equipotential zone out there. If we're not sure of the earthing arrangement in the main building, though, that would tell us that we then need to find that out to make sure that we have got adequate bonding, for example, so sizes are correct. So yeah, I think a little bit of work's required there to ensure that yes, if we can't tell whether it's TT, TNS or TNCS, it sort of raises a whole load more questions in the main building. So yeah, I think a little bit of a further investigation is required there. You can look to see if you mentioned a nice low ZS, which is very good. So that probably tells us that we're going to meet disconnection times of protective devices. So we might not be looking at potentially dangerous situations, but we need to, for example, if it were TT, it was found to be TT, but you can't find where the earth electrode is, then we'd recommend, for example, that's C3'd, in that it could be improved by having an earth electrode which is readily identifiable for future test and maintenance purposes. So not directly saying that it's potentially dangerous, but would certainly advise a little bit more work in terms of